It started on a Friday that felt like every other. There I was, lounging in my too quiet house, wondering when my life had become so predictable. My husband, bless his heart, had become more married to his job than to me. Nights were lonelier, and conversations were more about what was for dinner than how we felt. I craved something, anything, that felt like excitement. That night, I decided I wasn't going to be the dutiful, waiting wife. I needed to feel alive. So, I did something out of character. I went out alone, to a bar downtown, the kind where the music vibrates in your chest and the lights make everyone look a bit more interesting. The bar was buzzing, a mix of the usual Friday crowd looking to unwind. I nestled myself at the corner, nursing a drink I barely liked. That's when he walked in. You know the type. Charisma in his step, a smile that said he knew every secret to making a woman blush. He caught my eye, and like a magnet, I was drawn in. He sauntered over, all confidence and smooth talk. Seems like you could use some company, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I should have said no, thanked him and turned back to my lonely drink. But I didn't. The conversation flowed easier than the drinks, and with each laugh, I felt more seen than I had in months. The night blurred, a mix of flirtatious glances and the thrill of the unknown. It was reckless, the way I hung onto his every word, how we danced a little too close. When he suggested we leave, a voice in my head screamed to reconsider, to remember the life I had outside this moment. But that voice was drowned out by the louder one, craving to feel something new, something exhilarating. So, I left with him, abandoning all my usual caution at the door. The hotel room was a stark contrast to the vibrant bar, quiet except for our breathless laughs. The night was a whirlwind, a cascade of decisions I knew I'd regret come morning. But in the darkness, with him, I allowed myself to forget. I forgot about the husband who barely looked at me, the silent dinners, the loneliness. For those hours, I was someone else, someone daring, unburdened by the expectations of my mundane life. Morning came too soon, its light unforgiving. The exhilaration of the night turned into a heavy cloak of guilt as I watched him sleep. What had I done? I slipped out of the bed, gathering my things in a silent panic. I left before dawn could fully break, before he could wake up and see the regret in my eyes. The walk of shame, they call it. But it wasn't shame that weighed on me, it was the realization that I had crossed a line from which there was no return. I had become the woman I judged in stories, the one who made a selfish choice without thinking of the consequences. As I made my way back to the life I had momentarily escaped, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. And not for the better. I had sought excitement, a break from the monotony, but at what cost? The thrill of the night was gone, replaced by a gnawing dread of the fallout that was sure to come. This chapter of my life wasn't one I'd ever imagined writing. It was supposed to be a night out, a brief flicker of rebellion. Instead, it became the first domino to fall in a line that would lead to my unraveling. Walking through the door of what was supposed to feel like sanctuary felt more like entering a courtroom, knowing I was guilty as charged. My heart was pounding, not from the remnants of last night's thrill, but from the fear of the unknown that lay ahead. I had rehearsed a story in my mind, a simple tale of an impromptu girls' night that had stretched into the early hours. It sounded plausible enough if I could keep my voice from trembling. I found him in the kitchen, his back turned to me as he made coffee. The normalcy of the scene was jarring. Morning, I ventured, trying to sound casual, as if the weight of last night's choices wasn't threatening to crush me. He turned, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "How was your night?" he asked, and I could swear there was a sharp edge to his curiosity. "It was good, just what I needed," I lied, pouring every ounce of feigned nonchalance I could muster into my voice. "You know, girl talk, wine. It got late so I crashed at Jess's." The name slipped out too easily, a testament to how often I'd used my friend as an alibi in my head. His nod was slow, too slow, and I could feel the threads of my fabricated tale unraveling with each passing second. The morning passed with an unease that clung to me like a second skin. His questions were casual, almost indifferent, but there was a scrutiny in his gaze that I couldn't meet. I busied myself with chores, anything to avoid that penetrating look. It was when I was folding laundry, a task I usually loathe for its monotony, that he found the receipt. The slip of paper floated to the floor, innocuous yet damning, a stark reminder of a reality I wished I could undo. "What's this?" The simplicity of the question belied the complexity of the emotions behind it. I froze, every rehearsed excuse deserting me as I turned to see him holding the hotel receipt, the date and time a glaring testament to my betrayal. Oh, that? Must have picked it up by mistake. You know, from Jess's place, I stammered, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. The skepticism was palpable in the air between us, a chasm that widened with every word I spoke. The argument that followed was a blur of accusations and denials, a dance of desperation on my part to cover the tracks that led directly to my guilt. He wielded the receipt like a weapon, and I parried with lies that sounded feeble even to my own ears. The air was charged with a tension that spoke of shattered trust and unspoken fears. It was a confrontation that left us both wounded, retreating to our corners to nurse our injuries in silence. In that moment, I realized the magnitude of the chasm my actions had created. The lie I had lived, even if just for one night, had irrevocably altered the fabric of our marriage. I had ventured into a territory where the way back seemed obscured by the shadows of my choices. The husband I had returned to was no longer the man I had left. Suspicion had replaced the easy trust that once defined us. And as I stood there, watching the distance grow between us, I couldn't help but wonder if some truths are better left unsaid, or if the lie I lived would be the unraveling of everything we had built. Just when I thought things couldn't spiral further out of control, they did. It's like I was living in a badly scripted drama, but the plot twists were all too real, and I was the villain in my own story. The aftermath of that fateful night turned my world into a surveillance state, with me none the wiser. It started with a feeling, you know? That prickly sensation on the back of your neck, like you're being watched. I brushed it off as paranoia, the guilt manifesting in my everyday life. But it wasn't just guilt. It was real. He'd hired a private investigator. The thought alone was enough to make my stomach churn. Not out of fear, but out of disbelief. Was this what we had come to? Spies and secrets in a marriage that was once built on trust? The PI was thorough, I'll give him that. Every clandestine meeting, every stolen moment with the stranger, was documented in glaring, unforgiving detail. Photos, messages, the evidence was compiled with a meticulousness that left no room for doubt, no space for lies. The bombshell dropped on a Tuesday morning, an ordinary day that became anything but. The evidence of my betrayal, once confined to the shadows, was thrust into the merciless light of day. Photos and messages, once thought private, were sent anonymously to my workplace and family. The fallout was immediate and devastating. My job, a position I had dedicated years to, was gone in the blink of an eye. The scandal, they said, was too much. The disgrace I had brought upon myself now extended to them, and they severed ties with a cold finality that left me reeling. But the professional fallout paled in comparison to the personal. My family, the people who had stood by me through every high and low, were suddenly strangers. The disappointment in their eyes was a blow more painful than any other. Conversations became minefields, every word weighed down by judgment and disgust. The estrangement wasn't loud or violent. It was the silence, the absence of their presence in my life, that cut the deepest. I had become a pariah, isolated by my own actions, a leper in my own skin. In the midst of this turmoil, the stranger, the catalyst for my downfall, became a ghost. Attempts to reach out, to find some semblance of solace or explanation, were met with silence. It was as if he had vanished, leaving me to face the consequences of our actions alone. The loneliness was suffocating, a constant companion in the wake of my shattered world. Looking back, I see the naivety in my belief that I could keep this secret, that the truth wouldn't claw its way out and lay waste to everything in its path. The irony isn't lost on me. I sought an escape from my mundane life, a spark of excitement, and instead ignited a fire that consumed everything I held dear. The cost of my transgression was higher than I could have ever imagined, a price paid not just by me, but by everyone around me. In my quest for something more, I ended up with less than I started, a stark reminder that some actions have irreversible consequences, and the path to redemption is a lonely, treacherous road. In a plot twist worthy of the most twisted thriller, my life took a nosedive into realms I couldn't have imagined in my wildest, most paranoid fantasies. If I thought I'd hit rock bottom before, I was sorely mistaken. The real descent began the day he sat me down, his demeanor calm, almost clinical, as he laid bare the intricacies of the trap he'd set for me. He confessed, with a chilling detachment, that he'd been the architect of my downfall. Every misstep I'd made, every clandestine encounter with the stranger, had been carefully orchestrated by him. The stranger, the man I thought had stumbled into my life by chance, was nothing more than an actor. A pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. The revelation was a gut punch, the betrayal a bitter pill that lodged itself in my throat, a constant reminder of my naivety. But the cruelty didn't end with just words. He took his scheme a step further, twisting the knife with a relish that chilled me to the bone. A video, my own words damning me, was leaked online. My confession, meant for the ears of a supposed confidant, became fodder for the masses. The public humiliation was swift and brutal, a digital scarlet letter that marked me for the world to see. And as if to add insult to injury, he filed for divorce. Not just any divorce, but one that painted me as the villain, the adulterer who had forsaken her vows for a fleeting moment of passion. The legal documents were a cold, hard slap, a reminder that in his quest for vengeance, no blow was too low. The terms were merciless, designed to strip me of everything. And strip me, they did. Financial ruin came knocking next. The joint accounts, once a symbol of our shared life, were drained, leaving nothing but digital tumbleweeds rolling through the barren landscape of my bank app. Credit cards, those lifelines to normalcy, were cancelled, leaving me stranded in a financial desert with no oasis in sight. I was left reeling, a ship adrift in a storm of my own making, or so I thought. The truth was far more sinister. I was the victim of a meticulously planned vendetta, a game of psychological warfare where I was the unwitting opponent. The man I had married, the man I had loved, was a stranger, his heart a labyrinth of spite and vengeance from which there was no escape. In those dark days, I found myself grappling with the shards of my shattered life, each piece a reminder of the folly of my choices and the ruthlessness of his revenge. The isolation was complete, my once vibrant world now a monochrome tableau of despair. Betrayal, both mine and his, was the poison that coursed through the veins of our marriage, leaving nothing but wreckage in its wake. This wasn't just a chapter in my life. It was a complete rewrite of my narrative, a story where I was both the protagonist and the antagonist, caught in a web of deceit and retribution. The lesson was harsh, the price exorbitant, paid in the currency of trust, love, and security. In the end, I was left with nothing but the echoes of my choices and the cold realization that some actions are irrevocable, their consequences a chasm from which there is no return. In the midst of my turmoil, a new twist unfolded that I couldn't have scripted even if I tried. Just when I thought my situation couldn't get any more convoluted, life threw me a curveball in the form of a woman, fierce, determined, and with a story that mirrored mine in its betrayal, albeit with a twist. She was the real wife of the actor, the man I had believed was a stranger drawn to me by fate. She found me in a way that only someone who had been through the wringer of deceit could, unannounced and unapologetic. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady, her eyes holding stories of pain and defiance that resonated with my own. I was wary, of course. Trust was a commodity I could no longer afford, yet there was something in her demeanor that compelled me to listen. Her story unfolded like a soap opera, with layers of betrayal that made my own ordeal seem almost pedestrian. Her husband, the actor, had been part of a revenge plot so twisted it made my head spin. It wasn't just about my downfall, it was about hitting her where it hurt the most, through me. The realization that my catastrophic affair was merely a pawn in a larger game of marital chess was both a shock and a strange relief. I wasn't alone in this web of deceit. What came next was even more surprising. She proposed an alliance, a chance to turn the tables on both our betrayers. "Let's give them a taste of their own medicine," she said, her voice laced with a mix of anger and excitement. It was a dangerous proposition, one that could easily spiral out of control. Yet, there was a part of me, perhaps the part that had been scorned and humiliated, that leapt at the opportunity for retribution. Our plan was simple yet ambitious. We would dig into the darkest corners of their lives, exposing the secrets they held dear. Starting with hacking into my husband's personal and business accounts, a task that proved easier than expected with the help of a tech-savvy friend who sympathized with our cause. The information we unearthed was damning, a treasure trove of misdeeds that would crumble their facades of respectability. The sabotage was meticulous, a slow drip of information that began to erode their standing in both the personal and professional arenas. Each discovery felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of the power that had been stripped from us. Yet, with each move we made, a nagging doubt crept in. Were we becoming the monsters we sought to punish? The line between justice and revenge blurred, leaving me to ponder the cost of our vendetta. As our plan unfolded, the alliance I had formed with the actor's wife grew stronger. We were two women, wronged and resilient, fighting back against the machinations of men who had underestimated our strength. Together, we were formidable, a force fueled by the fires of betrayal but tempered by the lessons of our past. This chapter of my life was a departure from the victimhood that had defined me. It was a foray into uncharted territories of revenge and redemption, where the risks were high but the rewards, we hoped, would be even higher. As we laid our traps and watched as our adversaries began to falter, I couldn't help but wonder about the aftermath. Would our quest for retribution bring us the peace we sought, or were we merely weaving a new web of deceit that would entangle us further? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. The game had changed, and we were no longer playing by their rules. As the plot of my life thickened, I found myself embroiled in a psychological game of chess I never knew I was playing. With each move, the stakes grew higher, and the lines between ally and adversary blurred. My newfound confidence, fueled by the alliance with the actor's wife and our vengeful machinations, did not go unnoticed. My husband, with his ever-watchful eye, sensed a shift in the tide. His reaction was swift, a calculated attempt to sever ties and protect his own interests by accelerating the divorce proceedings. It was a clear message: he was no longer playing defense. Faced with this new challenge, I sought out the actor, the man who had played his role too well, becoming the linchpin in my husband's elaborate scheme. Our confrontation was fraught with tension, a dance around truths too painful to fully acknowledge. Yet, when faced with the weight of his actions, the actor's facade crumbled. Remorse colored his confession, revealing a complexity to his character I hadn't anticipated. His offer to assist in our plot against my husband was unexpected, a twist in our narrative that rekindled a flicker of hope. Together, we devised a trap to ensnare my husband, a plan to capture his confession and lay bare the extent of his manipulation. The setup was meticulous, every detail scrutinized to ensure there was no room for error. It was more than a plan. It was our last stand against the deceit that had ensnared us all. The showdown was set against the backdrop of a public forum, a stage where truths would be unveiled and masks would fall. The tension was palpable, a tangible force that enveloped us as the confrontation unfolded. Yet, in a stunning display of cunning, my husband turned the tables. He revealed his awareness of our scheme, a masterstroke that left us reeling. The actor's betrayal was the knife's final twist, his allegiance to my husband bought with promises I couldn't fathom. The exposure that followed was a spectacle of humiliation, my remaining secrets laid bare for the world to see. It was a calculated dismantling of my persona, a stripping away of any pretense of innocence. The isolation that ensued was profound, a realization that hit with the force of a tidal wave. I was alone, truly alone, in a sea of faces that looked upon me with scorn and pity. In that moment of utter desolation, the weight of my choices and the consequences of our tangled web of revenge bore down on me. The realization that I had become ensnared in the very trap I sought to set was a bitter pill, a lesson in the futility of vengeance. The isolation was not just physical but existential, a severance from the connections that tether us to our humanity. This chapter of my life, marked by betrayal and retribution, reached its climax in a display of dramatic irony. The very plot I had helped to weave became my undoing, a narrative twist that left me grappling with the shards of my shattered world. The quest for vengeance had led me to this juncture, a place where the lines between victim and perpetrator blurred. In the end, the price of our machinations was not just the collapse of relationships but the erosion of the self, a reminder of the perilous path that revenge weaves. The divorce papers, stamped and finalized, mark the end of a chapter I never wanted to write. They leave me with nothing, not just materially, but a hollow void where my sense of partnership once resided. The move from our shared home to a cramped apartment serves as a physical manifestation of my downfall, each box packed a testament to a life disassembled. Hunting for a job becomes my new normal, an endeavor marred by the shadow of my tarnished reputation. Each interview feels like a trial, my past transgressions the elephant in the room that no one wants to acknowledge but can't seem to ignore. The digital age shows no mercy, my name now synonymous with betrayal, a constant target for the vitriol of faceless critics on social media. The anonymity of the internet emboldens them, each comment a knife twist in the open wound of my public disgrace. The realization of my downfall is a bitter pill, a reflection on how far I've fallen from the woman I once was. It's in this landscape of defeat that an unexpected glimmer of hope appears, an old friend, a reminder of a life before chaos ensued. Her sympathy is a balm, her listening ear a rare solace in my world of isolation. Yet, this too proves to be a mirage, her motivations tainted by self-interest, leaving me more isolated than before. As if to underscore the totality of my loss, a burglary strips me of my remaining possessions, the few material reminders of my former life now gone. The violation feels personal, a symbolic stripping away of the last vestiges of my privacy and security. Shortly thereafter, a health scare lands a cruel blow, my physical well-being now mirroring the fragility of my emotional state. The absence of insurance, a casualty of my divorce, leaves me navigating the healthcare system alone, vulnerable, and exposed. In a twisted turn of fate, the stranger, the actor who played a pivotal role in my undoing, reappears with an offer of support. His gesture, laden with false sincerity, is the ultimate betrayal, a final act in the cruel play that my life has become. His duplicity, once revealed, is a clear reminder of the manipulation that has characterized my recent past. My story, once private, becomes fodder for public consumption, a cautionary tale dissected in forums and social media. The loss of my identity is profound, the woman I was now obscured by the narrative constructed by others. The celebration of my downfall by my husband and the actor, a spectacle of their cruelty, underscores the depth of their betrayal. In the solitude of my apartment, I'm left to confront the consequences of my actions, the choices that led me here. The isolation is not just physical but existential, a separation from the person I once knew myself to be. The view from my window, once a symbol of possibility, now frames the stark reality of my situation, a life in ruins, with no clear path to redemption. This chapter closes not with a resolution but with a reflection, a moment of introspection in the quiet aftermath of the storm. It's here, in the solitude of defeat, that I'm forced to confront the most painful truth of all. The person responsible for my downfall is the one I see in